Thank you. Good evening, and how wonderful it is to be on this stage with a local Conservative Member of Parliament, a senior member of Labour Leave, and it all goes to prove that this question of whether we win this referendum on leaving the European Union is not a question of left or right, it's a question of right or wrong. Now, I have spent 25 years campaigning for us to get this referendum. I have been described as the patron saint of lost causes. I've been called a crank, a gadfly, a raging eccentric, and my particular favourite, a fruitcake. But in all the battles that I've been involved in, there at the coalface of politics for 20 years, I thought I'd seen it all until today. And let me just show you what I've been doing today. Serious day, this. You know, we're an island. This was one of our great industries, have been for centuries, literally destroyed by membership of the European Union. Coastal communities devastated.
And actually, if we go on inside the European Union, God knows where it'll be in 5 or 10 years' time. Brexit is the only solution for our fishing industry. And when I hear our Chancellor constantly telling us how good the single market is for the economy of our country, just look at what it's done to this industry. I got into this because I'm sick to death of our country being sold out and given away by career politicians, and I want my country back, and that's why I'm here.
Whilst during this referendum campaign, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about the irresponsibility of open-door immigration. We also, on this side, have talked about the need to get back our pride and self-respect as an independent nation that charts its own future. But one of the areas that has simply not been discussed in this referendum was what has happened to our fishing industry. And that is why, working with Bob Spink from South Essex, we decided we'd put together a flotilla to go up the Thames, to go outside Parliament during Prime Minister's questions, and to protest about the death of an industry. I did it, I got involved in it, because I wanted to highlight the sheer travesty, in fact I'll go further, the betrayal of a whole industry from our nation. Now, when Edward Heath was about to go to Brussels to sign us up for the European Economic Community, those in Brussels realised there was a missing component, that the United Kingdom had 80% of the fish stocks in that EEC, and so they put in a clause just 48 hours before we joined, and that was the birth of the Common Agricultural Policy. When Mr. Heath's negotiator told him that what was planned was a grab of British assets, what did he do? He told his negotiator, it may be a bitter pill, but swallow the lot, and swallow it now. And so began the betrayal of an island nation's greatest renewable industry, and shame on Heath and shame on Parliament at the time for voting for it. And since then we have lost 100,000 jobs in fishing and fishing-related businesses. It's a subject in which I've always taken a deep, keen interest. I like fisher folk. They tell it how it is. They're my kind of guys, really, aren't they? But I've met people who, with tears in their eyes, have said, for 300 years, we've been on this beach, we've been on this harbour, and yet we're being destroyed because we get a tiddly fraction of the quotas. And the facts, ladies and gentlemen, are this, that we are only allowed to catch by value 20% of the fish that swim in British territorial waters. The rest are shared out on a principle of equal access to a common resource. And that common resource, folks, happens to be ours, and we give it to our neighbours. And the Norwegians, on the other side of the North Sea, have a thriving, booming industry, as do the Faroese and as do the Icelandics. So today was about an industry where men and women came to London from all over the United Kingdom, in many cases at great expense to themselves, and they did it, and I helped facilitate it, because they wanted to use their voice. They wanted to say outside that chamber during Mr. Cameron's PMQs, please listen to us. Please listen to our plight. Please look at what is happening to our communities, to our families, to a destruction of a whole way of life. And I was proud to be a part of helping those men and women to come to London today to ask for help. But somebody intervened. Now, I mustn't lower myself to his level, must I? No, I'm not going to. And do you know why I'm not going to? Because in this whole referendum, it is the other side who resort to abuse. It is the other side who try to disrupt our meetings. It is the other side. It is the other side that do these things. We don't need to behave like that. All we need to do is tell the truth about what has happened to our nation, and in this case today, what has happened to our fishing industry. But to be greeted by an Irish-born, multi-millionaire attempting, through loud music and constant abuse on the microphone, to drown out not just me, because I don't matter, but to drown out and to insult those struggling communities who'd come to London today, I think was totally and utterly disgusting. So there he was, our Irish multimillionaire rock star, on a boat full of middle upper class Blairites. Sorry, Brendan, but that's just the way it was. And it summed up to me what this referendum is all about. On the one hand, the establishment, protecting their position, and on the other side, struggling, decent British people wanting to be heard and wanting to have their say. But there was a moment from today that may perhaps be the moment that tips and turns this referendum. A boat from Southend got quite close to the Geldof Gin Palace. Now, those of you here that have been to Southend will know that Southenders are plain spoken. And the Southenders, as they pulled alongside, attempted to tell Sir Bob that perhaps he didn't know exactly what he was talking about. At least, I think that's the interpretation of what they said. And Geldof replied by doing that. And that photograph is now out on Twitter. That photograph will be in tomorrow's newspapers. That photograph sums up that what we've got here with the Remain campaign are the big banks, are the big multinational businesses, is big business all together. They are doing very nicely, thank you very much indeed, and to hell with the rest of you. Maybe that picture will turn the referendum. Maybe, in the end, we'll decide that Geldof's contribution to us winning back our independence was so great that that he will get the fourth statue in Trafalgar Square. And boy, haven't we seen it. Haven't we seen it from our Prime Minister? Our Prime Minister. Do you know, whatever people thought about Margaret Thatcher, whether they loved her or whether they hated her, nobody ever called Margaret Thatcher a liar. And yet we've got a Prime Minister who for 10 years has been a champion of Turkey joining the European Union and now tells us that he might use the veto. Now tells us they won't join until the year 3000. Well, tell me, Mr. Cameron, if they're not joining until the year 3000, why are we paying them £1.2 billion of British taxpayers' money in pre-accession aid? Tell me the answer to that, Mr. Cameron. Tell me, Mr. Cameron, when you said a few months ago that, of course, the United Kingdom could survive and thrive outside the European Union, why you now tell us it would lead to recession, poverty, and perhaps even World War III. Tell us, Mr. Cameron, why we should trust and believe you, when before the last general election, when you were told by the bosses in Brussels, if you remember, that we owed another £1.7 billion. Do you remember? And the Prime Minister, he stood there and said, "We will not pay this money." I thought, wow. I could become a Dave fan, you never know. And what did he do after the general election? He meekly paid the bill. So the question I ask with all these things is, was Mr. Cameron deceiving us then, or is he deceiving us now? Do we believe that our Prime Minister is telling us the truth? And what about the Chancellor? What about the Chancellor? Telling us we'll all be worse off by £4,300 a year. You know, why not put a nought on the end? Why not really scare everybody? The truth, folks, about the scare stories on trade is this. We joined, just over 40 years ago, what was sold to the British people as a common market. And the benefit of that common market was actually, in economic terms, undoubted. It was the ability to sell British goods and services into the European marketplace free of tariffs, free of trade barriers, which since the Wall Street crash and since the great distrust of World War II, they'd been very, very high. There was an economic, if not political, rationale 40 years ago for doing as my mum and dad did, which was to believe the politicians and to vote to stay part of that market. But in 40 years, the world has changed beyond all recognition. And those high tariff barriers on manufacturers have come down to levels that are so small, they are, compared to the foreign exchange risk every month for an importer or exporter, virtually negligible. And for the benefit now of saving a few £1 billion a year in tariffs, we have to accept that the 88% of our economy that is not involved in sales of goods or products to the European Union, that 88% still is regulated by them. For the benefit of saving a few £1 billion on tariffs, we have to accept the total free movement of people, whereby the British passport is now available to 508 million people. For the so-called benefit of that small tariff reduction, we have to accept that we are part of a union that prohibits and prevents us from making our own associations and our own deals with anyone else in the world. And for the benefit of all of that, we have to pay an undisputed net membership fee of £34 million a day. That is £10 billion a year. And whatever threats we get from Osborne or from Cameron, or I was going to say from the leader of the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign, Lord Rose. Anyone seen Lord Rose? Anyone heard from Lord Rose? Is he in hibernation? Is he ill? Is he too embarrassing for them to bring out? I think he might be. Because remember, when he appeared before the Treasury Select Committee, he was asked the question, if Britain controlled its borders, did that mean that the wages of average workers would go up? And he said yes, but I don't think that would be a good thing. No wonder they've locked him in the cupboard. So here is my point, folks. You think you've heard threats already? My suspicion is, with just over a week to go, you ain't heard nothing yet. There has been a surge towards the Leave side over the course of the last couple of weeks. There has been an attraction by the honesty and optimism of our message. But there's also, I think, been a rejection of this constant diet of negativity and threats and, frankly, downright lies. But they will not change. They will not stop. I'm told that next week it is even possible that my old friend Jean-Claude Juncker who isn't much use after lunch, I've got to tell you. So they'll fly him in early is my guess. But I'm told that even Juncker will come next week. I predict that in the last days of this campaign, this is what they are going to tell you. They are going to tell you that if Britain leaves the European Union, our so-called partners will be vindictive. Our so-called partners will be nasty. Our partners will do it because they fear if we get a good deal, that the whole edifice will come crumbling down. Oh, you like that idea, do you? So do you think, like me, that maybe if after Brexit the Danes have a referendum and we get Dexit, and the Netherlands have a vote and we get Nexit, and the French have a vote and we get Fexit? Do you think, like me, that maybe we have the honour as a nation to knock out the first brick at the bottom of that wall? And yeah, I want to live and cooperate in a Europe of sovereign, independent states that are friends and mates and neighbours with each other. Who would not want to live and be part of that Europe? But it's not this Europe. But they're going to threaten you. They're going to tell you that to stop the whole edifice from crumbling, our European partners will be vindictive and will be nasty. Well, all I can say is if they're that nasty, what the hell are we doing there in the first place? But here are the real facts on trade and on numbers and on business. Take it from me, unlike this other lot who went straight from university into research offices, I actually had a job for 20 years and I've bought and sold and shipped goods and products all over the world. So please, for a minute, take this from me. Trade is not made by politicians or bureaucrats. Trade is made by customers. Trade is made by consumers. Trade is made by people saying, I like that product, I trust its reliability, and I will pay its price. And we, when it comes to the relationship with the European Union, we are the customer. Because we buy more German motor cars and more French wine than we sell them British-made motor cars or English sparkling wine. We have a trade deficit with the European Club of £1,000 a year for every man, woman and child in this country. They need us far more than we need them. There are general elections next year in France and in Germany. And if Angela Merkel says to the German car industry, I'm sorry, but we're going to disadvantage you in trading with what is now the Eurozone's biggest trading partner in the world, she will lose that general election. But even if, in the worst case scenario, they did no trade deal with us at all and reverted to the tariffs that are allowed under World Trade Organization rules, even in that example, the costs of our membership now massively outweigh the minor benefit we get from those reductions in tariffs. Ladies and gentlemen, the worst case scenario is better than where we are today. Please do not be frightened. And what do we gain? What do we gain? We gain for those men and women I saw who came to London to be abused by Bob Geldof. We get back what is rightfully ours, and we reclaim our territorial waters and the fishing rights of those that swim within it. We take that back. We take back control of our borders. And rather than having an open door, with net migration levels now running at 10 times the post-war average, and that's if you believe the official figures, which I don't, we get back the ability so that we can choose who comes to live, work, and settle in our country, and let's have an Australian-style point system. Let's say to people, you know, if you're under 45, you've got a trade or skill to bring, you haven't got a criminal record, you bring your own health insurance, then in sensible numbers, you can come to our country. And what else do we gain? I said, what else we gain? We get back what those that went before us fought for, and in many cases laid down their lives for, standing shoulder to shoulder with our friends from around the Commonwealth. We get back our pride and self-respect as a nation, as a people, knowing that we are in charge, knowing that we are the masters of our own destiny, knowing that we'll all stand half an inch taller when we walk down the high street next Friday morning. We have been conned, we have been lied to, we have had everything that those that went before us held precious, bit by bit, salami slice by salami slice, given away. And the message from us, the People's Army, as we go out and talk to our friends and our neighbours and our family, the message must be, we want our country back. We want our country back. Please join us, help us. Let's make next Thursday Independence Day. Thank you. The voice just about held out.